Hello, everybody. This is Rob Fredette with the podcast HODGEPOD, and I'm going in a different direction tonight. I'm looking forward to this talk. I have Jeremy Bryant on from the podcast Paranormal, the New Normal, and his podcast is a very popular podcast, and I'm looking forward to learning some new things about what it's all about. And I read things, and I listen to things, and I watch things, so I'm going to talk to an expert tonight on the paranormal. And Jeremy, welcome to my podcast. I really appreciate you jumping on here tonight.
My pleasure, Rob. And I mean, very popular and expert. You're flattering me here tonight. Jeez, I love it.
That's great. That's great. So talk about your podcast, Paranormal, the New Normal. What do you cover? I've listened to quite a few episodes. You go in a lot of different directions, and you learn a lot. And talk about it, if you would, please.
Sure. I mean, Paranormal New Normal, it was kind of just to start a podcast of my own. I started off on another podcast with a group, and everybody said you have a great podcast voice, you have opinions, you need to have your own show. I said, okay, what am I going to do? What do I love talking about? And I love talking about paranormal, but very few people talk about it with. I mean, it's not something you can go up to like a group of people at work and start talking about because they're going to look at you like, what's wrong with you? So I wanted to start a paranormal podcast, but I wanted it to be about the guest. I wanted it to be about their experiences and their paths down the spiritual, paranormal, supernatural life. And said, you know what? Paranormal is slowly becoming the new normal. More and more people are getting into it. There's more and more coverage of it in the media, in television, books, everything. In every form of media, there's more and more paranormal every year. And I was like, all right, Paranormal's the New Normal. That's a good name. I'll take it. So I just started off talking to a friend the first episode from the podcast I was on. And from there, I started finding mostly paranormal investigators to talk to in the beginning. But slowly, as I found more ways to get guests, I started branching out into things I never thought I really would cover. Mediums and psychics and even science, usually a little bit of fringe science, but scientists. I mean, I never thought I'd be talking to scientists on a podcast. Never thought it would be my thing I could carry a conversation with. But turns out I can carry a conversation with anybody about anything, basically. It just has to be interesting enough. And with paranormal topic, it always is interesting. So I'm 200 episodes deep almost, and just keep going and keep finding more and more interesting people to talk about in that line of life.
That is great. And I looked up the definition of paranormal just before we got on: denoting events or phenomenon such as telekinesis or clairvoyance that are the scope of normal scientific understanding. So, you said earlier that you are able to see it now. It's like mainstream now. You hear it on the radio, you see it on TV, you see shows, ghost hunters, you see other things about UFOs now. So what are some of the things as far as like the paranormal, like ghosts? Okay. I think there is something out there as far as a presence of somebody or something. What's your take on that?
Now, are we talking the presence of multiple spirits? Or are we talking the presence of some big thing in the sky that some people like to call God?
Well, I'm talking about just like haunted areas. Yeah. So you're talking things from the past, like Alcatraz or Salem, Mass, where the Salem witches are, or cemeteries and other eerie buildings, I guess you could say. There's like the buildings that you see that look eerie and they've been condemned for years. And then all of a sudden you look it up on the internet, you'll see TV shows on ghost hunters going into these places that are totally like desolate, and they in the middle of the night, and they find something on the video and they freak out.
Well, I am personally not a fan of a lot of the ghost hunting shows because a lot of them seem to be very scripted and fake. And I mean, Zach Baggins right there. But I personally, I live in a haunted house, so I could tell you that ghosts are 100% freaking real. My family and I experience it every day of our lives to some degree. And I've talked to enough people who communicate with spirits that there's no way I could not believe spirits exist. And really, as Einstein said, energy doesn't just get destroyed. It has to exist somewhere. So when a person dies, that energy has to go somewhere. So why not turn to a spirit in some cases?
Yeah, and when I was looking right before we got on, I was looking at the up in New England. You're on what part of Massachusetts are you in?
I am up in north central Massachusetts, Worcester County.
Gotcha. I grew up in North Andover in the Merrimack Valley, just south of, actually called the North Shore, just south of the New Hampshire border. So I went to Worcester many times to go see concerts back in the day at the old Worcester Centrum. I don't even know what it's called now, but I remember making that 51-mile trek to and from to go see concerts there. But what about in like Massachusetts? Are there things in Massachusetts that are considered out of the realm, haunted, or that you would off the top of your head?
Oh, Lord. I mean, Massachusetts, since it's one of the oldest states in the country, is very haunted. I mean, the Revolutionary War battlefields are still haunted from stories I've heard. Salem, like you said, is supposedly you can still tap into energy there if you have the ability to. And I mean, let's not forget the infamous Bridgewater Triangle down in the South Shore of Massachusetts. My wife is actually from there, and that area is believed to be highly haunted with a lot of different phenomena, not just ghosts and spirits, but I mean, Hudgewockies, Bigfoot, giant snakes, portals to other dimensions. I mean, the history of the Bridgewater Triangle is a conversation that could take 4 or 5 hours easy if you're going to cover every aspect of it. I mean, Massachusetts is a very, very old. It has been, well, okay, I mean, all land's old, but Massachusetts has been residing for a long time at this point, and there's been a lot of history here, and history tends to leave marks in the spiritual world.
I grew
The errors of humans.
Mm-hmm.
The errors of humans in the past seem to just residing emotions is the best way to put it, like residing emotions in places. And even if there's not physical haunting, there still can be an emotional haunting.
I would think Salem, Mass must have night tours or things of that nature for haunted areas in Salem, Mass. It's a beautiful city, but obviously known for the Salem witch trials. And last year I went to Hot Springs, Arkansas with my wife. We went up there Memorial Day weekend, and there's a building there on the top of the hill overlooking Hot Springs, and it's the Army Navy Hospital, and it's the most eeriest building I've ever seen. I took pictures of it. It's condemned at this point, and I went on looking online, and it is said to have some hauntings in there as well. So as far as like ghosts or spirits or presence, what actually have you ever talked to anybody who's actually spoken to or had been in the presence of a spirit or ghost?
Well, multiple clairvoyants I've spoken to actually on my show, they have whatever you want to call it. I mean, they call it their guardian angels. They call it their guides, their spirit guide. I mean, they call it a lot of different names, but a lot of them have had it standing right next to them while they're doing the show, according to what they're telling me. And I've had their guides speak with spirits around me when I'm podcasting, because apparently when I do my paranormal podcast, it's a anchor for the spirits of my house to be around me normally, which I always got really cold doing it, so I never really like put two and two together for a while. And then one day, one medium just started talking to me about the different spirits around me, and all people I knew, and things that she couldn't have known about me, because you can't even Google this information about me. So, I mean, my some of these relatives and friends, like they weren't internet people. They were never on the internet like mass, and even if they were, none of their names are the same as mine. So you couldn't relate the two. She couldn't have pre-researched and then just known these things. It's impossible.
What is the one big story that you have heard that really like wowed you of all the guests you've had on your podcast?
As far as spirits go, that's talk about a tough question. I've heard a lot of them. I mean,
we can come back to that if you want. You can think about that. That's no worries. It is. It's really weird because in the subdivision I live here in Tennessee, there is a cemetery actually dead center in the middle of our subdivision of 200 houses. And I did some looking up the other day. This was a parcel of land that was, desolate, was just overgrown for hundreds of years. And in the late 90s, it was sold. and there was talk of a cemetery in the middle, in the brush of this subdivision that was being built where I live now. And there is a cemetery from the 1700s and 1800s. And if I were to walk from my backyard, it's probably a 30, 45-second walk. I wonder sometimes if there's some spirits in my house, because sometimes some funny things happen. And I'm not one to talk about this, but this is sometimes weird stuff happens.
Well, I mean, it's highly possible, and from what I've been told, spirits don't need to necessarily haunt one place. That's myth. That's what movies have done to our beliefs. But spirits can just be wandering by and either be attracted to spirits that already are in your house and they just can sense it, so they come in too to see what's going on, or B, they just seems like a nice place to rest for a little while, so they go into your house just to kind of take a pit stop for a little while before they go wherever they want to go.
Well, there's been times where I've gotten out of the shower and the faucet's on in the sink, and I'm like, I didn't turn the faucet on. It's like, I did not turn that faucet on. I know I didn't. Guardian angels, how would you describe what guardian angels are? Because have you ever had an instance where a guardian angel has been in your presence?
Not that I could particularly sense. I mean, I have been told at this point that I am starting a spiritual awakening towards having some empathic abilities, but because I can sense things from what I experience, but I can't really see things like a clairvoyant could. I can't see anything. I could just kind of sense when things are nearby. I get certain feelings in my body, whether it be a tingling in the middle of my brain, basically, or the obvious temperature drop is usually a good sign. But So, I mean, but guardian angels, I've had a lot of people tell me about guardian angels and spirit guides, and to me, they're kind of one and the same. I think angel is just a term people use because we were all brought up religious in the ages we were brought up in, the different eras. And I mean, whether angels and demons are real, that's a whole nother conversation I don't know if you wanted to get into, but I believe there are protective beings out there that look out for humans, whether they're just regular spirits who that's just what they want to do when they pass, is they want to just look out for certain people. Or, I mean, I also heard that they can be like your relative that passed, that they want to be your protector. They want to stick by your side to make sure nothing really bad happens to you if they can stop it.
Yeah.
One of the most miraculous stories I heard on my show, an author, I can't remember her name for the life of me. I'm sorry. I can't remember your name. You wrote a book about why tigers like bubble baths. It's a funny title, but it's an interesting book. And she was pregnant, actually, in Massachusetts. She lived in Massachusetts at the time. She was pregnant, walking out to her car in the winter. She slipped on a piece of ice and was about to fall on her stomach. And literally, she said it was like time froze. And she was able to like get her footing because it seemed like time froze and she had all the time in the world to do it. And then once she got her footing, it seemed like everything just went back to normal, like hear cars speeding by and whatnot on the road nearby. So, I mean, that to me is one of the most definitive experiences I've heard about guardian angels. They literally were protecting an unborn life at that point.
Interesting, because I've had one or two instances where I've had it. Back in 2005, I thought I was having a heart attack, and my wife works at a hospital, and I called her and I said, I think something's wrong, something's not right with me. So I called her and I said, I'm on my way. I drove to the hospital, which was probably crazy in of itself. Well, over the years, I've gone to have lunch with her, and there's a big 4 or 5 level car garage there, and I always park on the 4th or 5th level. So I'm driving to the hospital. I pull in. Never, ever, in all the times that I drove, there was a parking space. The first parking space on the first level was open, and I parked my car there. And I don't know if that was by chance or a guardian angel, but somehow that parking space was left open for me so I could get out of my car and not walk down 4 levels versus just walking straight to the cardiac unit. Found that to be rather strange after I went through the ordeal. Ended up being a heart spasm, but I think that guardian angel thing takes place with, going to like if you're in danger or there's something, an emergency, something happens where something is there for you just to park in there, make it less stressful. What's your thoughts on that?
I don't know if I would actually call that a guardian angel experience as much as I would just say I'm a huge believer in fate personally. I believe everything that happens to us is predetermined to happen. I mean, we may be able to change some minor details here and there, but anything somewhat even slightly major to us has been predetermined. It's going to happen whether you want to or not, whether you can stop it or not. It's going to happen. So I think certain times in life, maybe things are made to be a little easier for us. I mean, it kind of can bring us into the whole matrix simulation theory as well, but I don't know. I mean, it depends which way you subscribe in that theory, but I believe in fate. I mean, the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans believed in fate. They would talk to oracles who could predict the future, supposedly. So, I mean, one of my favorite images is like from the Disney Hercules movie in the '90s of the oracles, like actually trying to cut like the threads of people to kill them. And like to me, that's what fate is. It's a thread that we all have to follow. Sometimes maybe a little piece of that thread will get ripped off if we do one little thing different, but most of the time you can't change it. You're just going to keep going down it until you get to the end where it gets snipped off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess it's people's perception of the guardian angel. I think it could have been fate that day, but I found that odd that I used to go to have lunch with my wife many times and always never got a parking space on that first spot. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was Bigfoot. What are your thoughts on the Bigfoot? Hundreds of years we've been hearing about it, the possible sightings. Years ago, there's a supposed photograph from the 70s. And I don't know if you remember the show In Search of with Leonard Nimoy. They have an episode of Bigfoot I did watch, and that was 45 years ago. And they had experts on there saying that the photo wasn't doctored. What's your thoughts on the Bigfoot in the Northwest?
Oh, I mean, Bigfoot is okay. Well, Bigfoot is I've been into Bigfoot since I was in elementary school. So Bigfoot is one of those things that I highly, highly believe in. Now, I could debate the different reasons it exists for all day, but not even really reasons, the different way it exists, like a million different ways. But I mean, Bigfoot to me definitely exists, and it's not just in the Northwest United States. Bigfoot is literally a worldwide phenomenon. They don't call it Bigfoot in other parts of the world, but there's other names for it. The Yowie, the Yeti, or the term I hate, the abominable snowman. But I mean, there's every country in the world has some kind of Bigfoot type of creature they see. The only place it's called Sasquatch or Bigfoot is the UK and United States and Canada. But the Patterson-Gimlin film in I want to say it was 60s, not 70s, but the Patterson-Gimlin film, one of the most highly debated things in paranormal. I believe it's real because one of the four people involved said it was fake at one point, but I think he was just sick of being questioned about it and he wanted to get out of it. Everybody else in it has always said it was true. And special effects and costume designers from movies in the modern age have watched that video and have straight up said, we don't have the technology to make something look that real now. How could they make something that real back then? It would be literally impossible. A fake gorilla suit or fake monkey suit from the 60s would look horrible. It would look like Stu Pickles dressed as one on Rugrats back in the 90s. Like that's what it would look like. It wouldn't. You can literally see, and it's a female Sasquatch in that video, and you could see the muscles in her abs and stomach move when she walks. You couldn't fake that detail in a video in the 60s, 70s. I mean, there's no way. Mm-hmm. It's just literally impossible to fake it. It's just so much. I mean, I keep saying it. I mean, like the government made UFOs real. The next pandemic, the government's going to admit Bigfoot's real. When they need a scapegoat, that's what they're going to say.
Is that the video that you saw? Is that the video where it's walking and it like looks at the camera?
Yeah, it's walking. They were filming along a creek bed, and it's funny because they actually were going out there to make like a short movie with a fake Bigfoot suit, and there's even pictures of them like next to the monkey suit they were going to use, and it looks nothing close to that. It looks like a gorilla you see at a zoo. That Bigfoot happened to walk by at that time. I forget what they named her, but I want to say Lucy, but I could be wrong. But that Bigfoot happened to walk by at that time, and they caught it on camera. And there have been other there's been a lot of pictures set in the last 10 years. There's been a lot of videos in the last 10 years of things that can't quite be explained. Yes, I'm not saying every picture, every video that's put out there on YouTube or TikTok or Facebook is going to be real.
Mm-hmm.
No, there's plenty of ignorant people out there who just want to spend their time being trolls and spamming people with fake things. I know that. I'm not a fool, but there's enough pictures out there where I can, and it's the pictures where like they say like they circle something in the bushes and you can't really tell what it is. But I mean, I've studied some of them for hours and I can kind of start to see the details and looking at it and I'm like, all right, and plus I've talked to enough people who look for a living. I mean, I talked to Seth Breedlove, Reverend. Oh, I'm sorry, not Seth Breedlove. I haven't got him on yet. Trying on that one still, but I worked with someone he works with in Small Town Monsters, Reverend Mark Matsky.
Mm-hmm.
Small Town Monsters is a video production company that does paranormal documentaries, and they've done 4 or 5 Bigfoot ones now, and they had a mini series on their YouTube channel all about looking for Bigfoot evidence all around the United States and the world. And they literally went to the Olympic Project in Washington, and Washington, the state, not Washington, D.C., but the Olympic Project in Washington is a national preserve area.
Mm-hmm.
And they were given special permission to go in to film this documentary. And there literally is these giant circular nests on the ground that most people who are into the paranormal believe Sasquatch reside in these nests when they're in one area. And there was rows of them. And I mean, it's Washington, so it's already a highly known area for Sasquatch. And the fact that why does the government have this area cordoned off so people can't go there? What are they doing there? Are they studying Sasquatch? Or I mean, is that because if anybody thinks the government doesn't know that Sasquatch exists and that they haven't like done some kind of experimentation with it before, then I'm sorry, you're out of your mind. The government definitely knows they exist, and the government has had them. There's a famous story. I could not tell you where they originally came from, but during a forest fire somewhere out in, I think, the Midwest, this ambulance took away because during the forest fire, like firefighters are trying to put it out, and all of a sudden this burnt up looking creature runs out of the woods and just collapses in the road. They hosed it off,
Mm-hmm.
and they let an ambulance take it. It's commonly believed now it was a Sasquatch that was caught in the forest fire and was basically running for its life at that point. And the ambulance took it. The drivers of that ambulance and that ambulance were never seen again because it's highly believed that shortly down the road, a black car pulled up, stopped them, and they took it. They took the proof of it. They took the evidence. They took the body, and whatever the government does with things.
Huh. Interesting. Because I looked at looking at here. It's considered 6 to 9 feet, or it could be as tall as 10 to 15 feet tall. And that picture you're referring to, that looks like a tall Bigfoot in that picture from 1967 from the Patterson Gimlin
I was going to say
film.
68.
68? It was 68? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody...
I don't know. If it says 67, that's right. I was going to say 68, but I could have been a year off easily.
That's all right. And then somebody said the Michael Rugg, the owner of the Bigfoot Discovery Museum, claims to have smelled Bigfoot, stating, "Imagine a skunk that had rolled in dead animals and had hung around the garbage pits." Man.
Well, there's a reason they call it the skunk ape in the South.
Wow, that's unbelievable. But yeah, how come we haven't seen with all the technology? How come we haven't seen any? I mean, I think there is something to it, but how come with all the technology we have, we can't seem to grasp it right now?
Well, I mean, first thing is there have been plenty of hunting video,
Mm-hmm.
like hunter cameras that have caught images of Bigfoot and other phenomenon. That
Wow.
as soon as these people put this footage out, though, it kind of disappears fast, and that's the scary part. And I mean, the other reason for that most people believe is this, and this kind of goes into what Bigfoot is. A lot of people believe that Bigfoot is either extraterrestrial nature or ultra-terrestrial nature, which ultra-terrestrial meaning interdimensional. And that's part of the reason why people think that we can't catch it on camera, or that's a blurry picture or blurry video always, because if they are either extraterrestrial, they would definitely have technology more advanced than us, or be more advanced in everything than us. If physically, mentally, they'd be more advanced than us if they were extraterrestrial, most likely, and they came here somehow. And ultra-terrestrial, I mean, same thing. If they're from another dimension, who knows what that dimension has? Who knows what abilities they may have because they're from a different dimension? So that's why it's believed that when they're seen, they can make electronics kind of malfunction the same way that, oh, what, UFOs and extraterrestrials are known to do.
Well, that's just it's fascinating. Just like the Loch Ness monster and Bigfoot. It's the old In Search Of episode from like 1975 or 76 that Leonard Nimoy used to. It was a very I watched it last week, and it brought back memories when I was a kid watching that show. That show was pretty much, in accordance that there was Bigfoot back then. And like you said, I mean, how could anybody alter film or make a costume like that? And when it was walking, like a human being, and
and think about it. This is 67. We didn't even go to the moon yet, I don't think, unless my dates are off. And and that's if we even went to the moon. That's debatable, but I can argue both sides of that story very well. But it's just even more evidence. And I don't know if you ever heard of it, but I just did a guest spot on Stupid History Minute podcast about this a couple weeks ago. The Battle of Ape Canyon in the 1800s. They were either lumberjacks or gold miners, some group of pioneers went out to I don't remember exactly where it was, but it was somewhere out in the Midwest when we were still trying to tame the Wild West. And they went out there and they shot this creature dead because they had guns, of course, because 1800s. So they shot this creature dead that they found. And then that night they're staying in this little shack of a building. And all of a sudden they hear things start hitting the side of the building and the roof. And they look out and they see these monkey-like, ape-like creatures throwing rocks and sticks and other things at the house they're staying in. So basically it became a night of them firing their guns out the windows, trying to hit these things that are throwing rocks at them. And the next morning they found rocks, they found sticks, huge branches all around the house, and like dents all around the house because it's just a wood shack. But there was footprints, but there was no sign of any creatures, and the dead creature they shot was gone. So, it's called the Battle of Ape Canyon if anybody wants to look it up. It's a famous Bigfoot legend at this point, and it's one of the first recorded incidences of Bigfoot, though it is believed that Lewis and Clark had written something about Bigfoot too, but the government back then even made them take it out. I believe there were some pages found that Clark wrote originally that like somebody collected and found these pages and found this like passage about it.
Interesting, because you had mentioned about the miners. That was the first part of the In Search Of episode that I watched. There were miners, and the sound effects of the Bigfoot that they used for the show. They were firing their shotguns. I wonder if that was the same one or not, but they were miners. And
it had to be.
And anybody better doing In Search Of than Leonard Nimoy doing that. Have you ever seen any of those episodes?
Oh God, yes. I used to love that show when it was in reruns when I was a kid in the 90s. But you gotta love it. Leonard Nimoy was one generation of this, and then Dan Aykroyd became the next generation of it. And Dan Aykroyd was actually shooting a documentary about an alien experience he had, a UFO experience he had. He went out for a cigarette, and there was two men in black suits standing outside a black sedan waiting for him. And that documentary never got released.
Huh. Man, oh man. Well, you're speaking about the 90s. Do you remember that Fox show that came out? They showed the beings, the aliens. Remember? I don't know if they showed Autopsy.
Yes, Alien Autopsy. One of my episodes a while back, I want to say Bert something or Bert something. I interviewed someone who knew about that, who was involved with it, who was in the government at that time. And he went into full detail about behind the alien autopsy. It was a very interesting episode. And I've actually had a lot of people coming out of the woodwork that are trying to say that he's lying, that he's a known liar and everything. And I judge my guests by the look in their eyes when they tell me things. And So far, I think there's only one or two that I won't say names, but there's only one or two that I don't think were fully telling me the truth. All the other ones seem to at least believe they're telling me the truth.
I remember they hyped that show back in the 90s. I forget, 95, 96, 97. They hyped it and hyped it and hyped it. It was all black and white video, grainy from what I remember. I'll have to go back and
Yep.
watch that, but it just came to mind when you were talking about In Search of. Yeah, Leonard Nimoy, the way he used to narrate those shows was impeccable. Just
Well,
the
he's got
delivery.
he's got the him and Shatner. They got the voices for it. And Shatner did a show like that too for a while.
Did he really? Because I know he used to do
I think
Rescue 911 in the 90s, early 90s, late 80s. I know he did that, but that's interesting that he did that as well. That's incredible. That's when you look back. I mean, that was television back then.
I think he's done a couple different series about extraterrestrials because I think him being Captain Kirk, they kind of wanted him to do it just because of that because they knew it would get watches and they knew it would people be like, oh well, if he's talking about aliens, then I mean, because he was on a show about aliens.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner. So what other items do you cover on your podcast that we haven't talked about? It's really interesting. You have over 200 episodes. You've had some great guests on your episode, and you can hear other shows on radio. You see things on TV. So what other topics do you cover on your podcast?
Oh, it's always about what the guest wants to talk about more than anything because it's usually whatever they're specializing in. But so I mean, a lot of talks of mediums and psychics. That's kind of been my bread and butter for the show because that's just there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of people that have these abilities that had their awakenings in the last 20 years, and they want to talk about it. They want to spread the knowledge about this phenomenon that exists that a lot of people didn't believe existed for a long time or only existed in fairy tales and legends and books and movies for a long time. But I mean, one of my favorite topics, which I only really had one or two episodes about because it's hard to find guests who were willing to talk about this, that they had experiences, and that's dogmen. Which, for those who don't know, because a lot of people don't know, imagine, well, dogmen are the basis for what we know as werewolf legend.
Mm-hmm.
Dogmen are werewolves, but they don't turn back to human ever. They're like Bigfoot, but they're dogmen. They're big dogs that can walk on two legs or four legs, depending how they feel like going at that time. And they've been seen in both. There's two different types, people believe. There's two different species, kind of. One's only attacks when you're in its territory because it's territorial like a dog. And the other one is just a really aggressive creature who will attack anybody it sees or anything it sees. I mean, dogmen have been responsible for pet dogs going missing, pet cats going missing. Dogmen have been seen all over the world, really. I mean, it's a phenomenon that's as big as Bigfoot, but just not as well talked about because people didn't talk about it for a long time. Linda Godfrey was one of the first really big cryptozoologists to focus on it. She focused on the Beast of Bray Road mainly, which is a famous case of it from the 60s to this day in Wisconsin, the Beast of Bray Road. And in Wisconsin, there's also the Beast of the Land Between the Lakes, which is a island in the middle of a lake, basically between two rivers. And I've had people from the NADP, the North American Dogman Patrol, actually on my show talking about their trips to the Land Between the Lake. And it's funny because the first half of the island is all like any other woods. It's full of birds and you see roadkill every once in a while. You go to the second half of the island, you hear nothing. You hear no wild animals. You see no roadkill on the side of the road. It is just a desolate place, and they said they were automatically creeped out just being there. And they said every time you hear a twig snap or anything, you just jump out of your skin because you know what's supposed to live there, but if you see a dog man, usually you're lucky if you make it out to tell about it. But they've been around forever. I mean, I like to relate them back to Anubis, like the Egyptian god. Like I actually had a guest who was in the army, and one of his fellow soldiers in his troop saw a statue of Anubis in Egypt and freaked out and like literally lost it. And once they calmed him down, they're like, "What happened? Why are you acting like this?" And he said that. He's like, "What's that?" And pointing at the statue, and they're like, "That's Anubis, an ancient Egyptian god." And he's like, "I saw that creature in my backyard when I was a kid multiple times." which it turns out he was from New Orleans originally, or somewhere in Louisiana, which that's Rougarou territory, which is another name for dogmen that the French Cajun had for it. So, I mean, the story of werewolves came from dogmen, and that's always been one of my paranormal topics since I first started hearing about it about a decade ago, because it's interesting, because it's, I mean, man's best friend, but it's not man's best friend. It's a creature that is intelligent and can run on 4 legs or 2 legs, and that's the scary part. Because imagine if you see what you think is a wild dog come up to you, or like a lost dog come up to you, and you start petting it, and all of a sudden it stands up on 2 legs.
I'd probably pass out. That's wild. So
I was gonna say, like, I mean, Small Town Monsters has also done a few movies on dogmen as well that are very informing and very interesting. I mean, a lot of history in those documentaries.
Well, you know, I'm looking, we just talked about In Search Of, so I just decided just to pull it up just to see what they covered back at Leonard Nimoy in that show. Voices, Strange Visitors, Ancient Aviators, the Bermuda Triangle. I remember that one. Bigfoot was their 5th episode. Killer Bees, Earthquakes, The Mummy's Curse, Martians, Atlantis, Psychic Detectives, A Call from Space, Dracula, Ghosts, Life After Death, Loch Ness Monster, UFOs, Voodoo, Inca Treasure, The Magic of Stonehenge. And a lot of this stuff that was talked about back then is still talked about now, isn't it?
Most of it. I mean, the Bermuda Triangle seems to have quieted down since I was a kid. Like, people are not talking about it as much as they did when I was a kid. Because, like, in the 90s, that every time I went to the store, like on the National Enquirer, that'd be like every other month, that'd be the front cover, like, oh, the Bermuda Triangle mystery. And I mean, it was so many cartoons played on it and whatnot when I was a kid, and it was a huge thing. And now no one talks about it now. Like, I have not heard about it. No guest, I don't think, has ever brought up the Bermuda Triangle to me. Atlantis, on the other hand, I've had 2 guests talk about Atlantis in depth, and one of the guests, an author, believes he found Atlantis with his partner. He believes him and his research partner found where the main city of Atlantis originally was. And it's not underwater. It's under sand. It's in the middle of a North African desert.
Wow.
Which would make geographical sense, because it is well believed by all the writings that Socrates and Ptolemy did about Atlantis. Atlantis had many city-states. They conquered many nations, and they had many city-states all over the world, including North America, or at least the coast of North America. But well, not the coast, islands off of North America. But so yes, there may have been an island that sank, because, you know, things happen with earthquakes and whatnot. But the main city is in the middle of the desert, and from what I've been told, and I tend to think that this guy's logic was right on. I mean, I couldn't find flaws in what he was saying. I really couldn't, and it would make sense. And they weren't all killed out because it sank. They were killed out because of war. Like, eventually, the Greeks or the Egyptians were able to overcome them and just take them. So I don't know. I mean, to me, that kind of makes sense. And the other guest that had talked highly, I mean, both guests talked about this to some degree, but the other one talked highly about how ancient aviators, as you just put it, or ancient aliens, helped build Atlantis and helped make it, and they made human hybrids there, which would fall into what we call today starseeds.
Looking at another episode, Dreams and Nightmares. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Just about dreams and nightmares in general? Or?
Yeah, just like, you know, the unconscious, like, you know, you'll have nightmares, and why do nightmares happen? And then you haven't seen somebody in 40 years and you have a dream about them. It's like, how does that happen? That was one of the In Search Of episodes as well. The Money Pit Mystery, Lost Vikings, Sherlock Holmes, Indian Astronomers, Bermuda Triangle Pirates. So,
I mean, well, dreams and nightmares are naturally occurring, I believe, in some aspect at least, because, I mean, our brain does, we don't know what our brain can do fully even. That's just the truth of the matter. Nobody knows what our brain will do at 100% capacity. So what our brain does while we're sleeping, who knows? I mean, we're unconscious. The unconscious mind is a powerful thing. Now, as far as the paranormal version of that goes, there is sleep paralysis where people wake up and they can't move their body at all, and they see a demon-looking creature or some kind of monster-looking creature in the corner of the room, or sometimes it's crawling all over them and all over the bed, and they can't move, they can't scream, they can't make a sound. And then eventually they snap out of it. There's also exploding head syndrome where people wake up and they hear like what basically sounds like an explosion in their head, but nobody else in the house will hear it or nobody in this area will hear it. And then I had a guest, Vincent Field, who wrote a book about lucid dreaming and astral projection. That's actually the name of the book, I believe, unless I got those two backwards. And basically, I mean, astral projecting is just while you're sleeping, you can project your spirit into wherever you want to go. I mean, more and more people are getting into that now, especially since COVID, because they had nothing else to do. So these classes are being offered remotely online. They said, why the hell not? I got nothing else to do right now. And I mean, one of my co-hosts on my show, Global Strangeness, actually took classes on it, and she's actually pretty good at it, according to what she tells us. I mean, she can go find things towns away that are like she'll have her friend tell her, like, look for this item, like she'll describe it in detail. And the next morning she'll call her friend and be like, it's in this room right next to this. And she's like, and it'll be correct. I mean, and there was even a detective from Brooklyn, New York in the class with her. And he said that more and more cops are embracing this type of not behavior, but embracing the practice of astral projection as a way to help solve crimes. So, I mean, if police are using it and using it willingly, not just, hiring psychics off the book to tell them things, then there's got to be some merit to this. And lucid dreaming is a whole nother trip, because I literally was told stories by Vincent about going to different dimensions while dreaming, which numbers vary, but I mean, I've heard there's 12, I heard there's 17 dimensions, and I think one or two other numbers as well. And he'll travel to these different dimensions when he's sleeping, and some of them are peaceful dimensions with creatures that are friendly, and you just, like, you don't understand these creatures, you can't communicate with them, but you just get a good vibe from them. And they said there's some that are scary dimensions, and there's these creatures, some of them huge, some of them look strange, and they just don't give off good vibes. It gives off like a flight or fight kind of feeling when you're there, and you just want to get out of there as fast as possible. So, I mean, the mind can do a lot of things when we're sleeping, and I highly believe that lucid dreaming and astral projection are possible, because I've talked to enough people who have done it, and enough people who have. Almost anybody I talk to at least knows one person that can do it. That's the funny part.
You had mentioned something about the explosions or something when sleeping. I've had that happen a couple times.
It's called exploding head syndrome.
Yeah, and then you wake up and it's like everything's normal, and it's just like it's like an explosion. Yeah, that's happened a couple times. Yeah, it's a weird feeling. It wakes you up.
Some people believe that it might be like a foretelling that something bad might happen if you don't get up, like that you need to get up at that point because there's going to be something happening you need to either take part in or see or hear. But other people just think it's some random thing our head does, and we can't explain why it does it yet.
So while we're talking about what are some of your favorite movies that you like about the paranormal, or movies that have come out over the last 40 years that you really like, that you watch over and over again, that you could talk to my audience about? Because I have my pick. What are some of yours?
Ooh, paranormal movies. See, it's funny because
just any type.
On my show, I do. Yeah, I mean, well, on my show, it's funny because I do movie brackets on my show too, like every couple months, because I usually want a couple months to watch the 30-something movies that are in the bracket if I haven't seen them all. But there's a lot of movies out there I love. I mean, extraterrestrial movies alone, like there are so many I love. I mean, huge Star Wars nerd. Star Trek. I'm a Trekkie to some degree, but not really a full-blown Trekkie. So, I mean, I love those aerospace movies because it's just good science fiction, and it's like awesome extraterrestrial design. I mean, the amount of different extraterrestrials in those movies is so amazing. Mm-hmm. But I mean, on other ones, I mean, I like a lot of movies about where aliens come to Earth, whether it be to attack us or just for curiosity reasons. I mean, I just watched My Stepmother's an Alien from the 80s, and that's because we're doing an 80s aliens movie bracket in a couple weeks. But just watched My Stepmother's an Alien, which was a really funny Dan Aykroyd movie, and John Lovitz, great movie. Um, Mac and Me, which is a really cute kids movie, and actually, in my opinion, it's the better version of E.T. But I hate E.T. I really do.
E.T. was a phenomenal movie. E.T. was the technology that they had in that movie. That was what, 41 years ago, 42 years ago, was extraordinary. T and Thomas, who played Elliot in the movie, how he befriended him. I thought that was a phenomenal movie, and the ending was just absolutely spectacular.
See, Mac and Me is the same concept, but it's more of like a comedy in ways, and it's a lot of the same concept. Alien comes to Earth by accident. It gets sucked into a space probe that we sent up, and basically its whole family does. But the youngest one escapes, and a boy in a wheelchair happens to find it, and they become friends. And basically, it's all about trying to save the alien. To me, it's basically a better version of ET. I mean, I haven't watched ET in a long time, but even when I was a kid, I wasn't a big fan of it. I don't know why. I mean, it's Spielberg. I should be. They're just not. I mean, and I love movies that take place in space. I mean, of course, the Alien movies are freaking incredible, of course. And I mean, I just watched a movie last night, Enemy Mine. It's from the late '80s, I believe, and it's very Star Wars-esque in the beginning, but it's about a human soldier in space who crash lands on an alien planet and it's him and this alien, one member of the alien race are fighting. Mm-hmm. And throughout the movie, they become like best friends. Like they learn each other's languages. To me, I was sitting there last night, like tell my wife, like, it's such a great movie. I'm like, it basically has the message that no matter what differences, like creatures should get along. I mean, even if you don't speak the same language, you have to learn to get along. And so, but going outside the alien realm, I mean, The Man Who Killed Hitler and Bigfoot is one of my favorite Bigfoot movies. And because it's Sam Neill from like The Ranch and all the other Westerns he's been in with his famous mustache. Mm-hmm. But he plays this soldier, and it's basically a backlog story of like him killing Hitler in World War II. And then it's also a story about how they kind of like the government drafts him to go kill a Bigfoot that's sick and dying, mm-hmm. and they want to just get rid of it because there's a forest fire going on. So that movie it's a weird movie, but it's a great movie.
So the movies in the 90s, Mars Attacks, Independence Day, Men in Black, those were three great movies that had their own niche in the 90s, and they kind of gave a different feel, a different look into aliens. Obviously, there were movies, and they had a lot of entertainment, but it was nice the way that they had their niche in the 90s, because in the 80s you had E.T. and you had late 70s, early 80s, Close Encounters of a Third Kind. They kind of had comedy in those space movies in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, in the 80s and 90s, there's also more of like the horror alien movies too. I mean, Communion, Fire in the Sky, which Fire in the Sky is the tale of Travis Walker. I want to say Travis Walker. I could be wrong about that last name, but I mean, it's based on his real encounter of the fourth kind. And there's a lot. I mean, in the 80s too, you had the remake of Invaders from Mars, which that's one of my favorite alien movies now. I just watched it a month ago or so. It's such a well done movie for the 80s. And the creature design is so, I mean, it has to be, that's the thing with alien movies. It has to be a really good design for the creature. I don't want like the Blob. I hate the Blob because it's the laziest design for extraterrestrial creature ever.
And then War of the Worlds and what was the one with Brad Pitt in it? I can't remember. My mind has gone blank.
War Z? The zombie
World War
movie?
Z. Yeah, World War Z. What it was? I don't know what the heck I was thinking. Yeah, World War Z. Yes. Those are different decades, all have their own, I guess, feel or whatever for space movies. There's different kinds of space.
I mean, in every decade, there's the same genres. It's just, it's just amazing that extraterrestrials have not left the human mind since before Roswell, since the 50s, since the 60s. Like, extraterrestrials have not left the human mind. And now, it's been a staple in the movie industry for almost 100 years. I mean, extraterrestrials coming to Earth. I mean, Invasion of the Body Snatchers from back in the 50s. I mean,
Oh
like you said,
yeah.
War of the Worlds, one of the first major alien movies, War of the Worlds. I mean, they had so much back then. Uh, the Man Who Fell to Earth. The what's that? Oh, the Day the Earth Stood Still. That they redid it with Keanu Reeves in the 2000s, but it was originally from the 50s, and I actually watched that version in sci-fi class in high school, and it was amazing. It was a really good movie. I mean, extraterrestrials have been around forever. I mean, there's a reason Star Trek became one of the most popular shows of all time because it featured space. We've always been Humans have since the beginning of time. Humans have looked up at the stars and questioned what's out there. So, I mean, the ancient Greeks used to write about it all the time, for God's sake. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love the way they did Star Trek in the 60s with the USS Enterprise. I thought that cast that crew more perfectly with all the actors in that series, and it's quite remarkable. Like William Shatner is in his early 90s, and he's still about and still talks about Star Trek. I think it's fascinating and it's really cool. Star Trek was a tremendous show, and the movies also were a big hit in the 80s as well when they came out after the show, was off television for so many years. Those movies when they reunited the cast were phenomenal as well.
yes, I mean, and it's actually funny because I was watching a show of William Shatner probably about a decade ago now, not a decade ago now, but like 7, 8 years ago now, where him, Terry Bradshaw, and a couple other famous actors or celebrities they're all old men, but they were traveling different places in the world, and it was just basically like a reality show. And one of the funny things is on the show, like William Shatner set the record straight. He's like, I never actually said "Beat me up, Scotty." He's like, actors on the show said it during the show, but he's like, I never actually physically said it. Captain Kirk never once said "Beat me up, Scotty." And so for the first time on TV, he actually said in that show, he's like, "Beat me up, Scotty." Like he said it for the first time ever. So I thought that was hilarious. that it's a myth that he ever said that. Like all the other crew members said it when they wanted to come back up to the ship, but Captain Kirk never was the one to say it.
Well, I love the fact that didn't they used to, with the effects, they'd do the white little glitter or whatever, and they go away and they come back. I thought that the technology for that was phenomenal. And the movie that we're referring to was The Happening in 2008, Mark Wahlberg, with the people who were dying.
Oh,
The Happening.
I haven't seen it.
I'll have to go back and watch that.
I haven't seen it yet. Trust me, all these movies we mentioned are on different brackets I have made. The podcast I originally came from is called Bracket Bastards. Mm-hmm. I'm still on it to this day. And so I always liked to do brackets because it's a fun thing to do on a podcast.
Yeah.
Having to pick between two different movies and whatnot, or two different songs if you're on my music podcast, whatever. But I took a hiatus from podcasting back in August, and I started making these brackets for my paranormal show, horror movies, because I had a horror movie one from Rotten Tomatoes, and it was one of my most popular brackets people wanted to do. So I started making horror movie brackets exclusively.
It's 9.
Yeah, and any other paranormal topics as well. But I now have, 200 plus brackets made up, and I will be doing them until I'm old and gray probably at this point. But we just did the first part of the holiday horror bracket because most of these are multiple parts because there's more than 30 something movies in the list. So we just did the first part of the holiday horror one for Christmas. Before that, we did the first part of the slasher horror film bracket, which is 25 freaking parts because there's 900 something movies in the bracket.
Jeez.
So trust me, if there's any of these movies I haven't seen, I will be watching eventually because they're all on my list at some point. They're all on my brackets at some point, and as soon as we get to that bracket, I will be watching those. And I mean, like I said, we're doing 80s alien movies. It's a 38 movie list. I think from Ranker, if I'm not mistaken. We're doing that one next in a couple weeks. Been watching movies for the last month and a half, and I've seen a lot of 80s alien movies that a lot of them I wish I never had to see because a lot of them are freaking horrible. But some of these B and C sci-fi horror movies, but I've also seen a lot of great ones that I'm happy I finally got to watch, like Cocoon, a classic alien movie from the 80s I never got a chance to see with Wilford Brimley. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's an amazing alien movie. And it even brings up Atlantis in it, for God's sake. So
Interesting. You mentioned a movie. Did you happen to check out the movie It by Stephen King with the clown Pennywise?
One of my favorite horror movies, because I am a that movie actually got me. I saw the first part in theaters. Actually, I saw both parts in theaters, but I saw the first part in theaters, and that's what got me. I started reading Stephen King after that. I saw that movie because my dad was a huge Stephen King fan when I was a kid. So, but I never was a horror fan until I saw Stephen King's It in 2017, and I was like, and it actually made me jump in theaters multiple times, and that's how I knew it was a good horror movie, because if it actually make you jump, I got out of fright for a second, like in a theater, then they're doing their job. They're doing what they're getting paid to do. So
Mm-hmm.
it got me to Stephen King, and I became more of a horror fan than ever because of that movie. So yeah, and that is an alien movie in a way, because that's what it is. It's a creature from outer space. So
Yeah, that first part in the movie there, where the boy's looking down the sewer there, and he's down there. That I said, "Don't go, don't go." That was like, that scene was just terrifying. I agree with you. That was a. I'll have to go back and watch it, but that was a scary as you know what movie.
I believe. I mean, poor Georgie, but he was also dumb enough to try to reach for that sailboat. You should have left your sailboat down there and just went home. But I mean, it's the idea of an extraterrestrial that could change shape, and it's weird because we've heard real stories about encounters where extraterrestrials do that. And I mean, one of my favorite podcasts that got me into the paranormal, that re-invoked my paranormal love in the mid 2010s, is Monsters Among Us podcast, but by Derek Hayes. It's all listeners or people with paranormal experiences calling in, and you hear it from their own voices, their stories.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, most of them are ghost spirit stories, of course, but there's Bigfoot stories thrown in there, some really amazing Bigfoot stories thrown in there. There's cryptid stories thrown in there, and there are a lot of alien UFO experiences. And one was an alien that transformed into a chimpanzee with overalls like Duncan from Duncan Checks In the 90s. And
Wow.
Another one was actually an alien that, or what they believe was an alien that came into the room at night when they were a kid, dressed as a T-Rex with like a doctor's coat on. Which I mean, yes, these all sound ridiculous and like they could have been fever dreams, but at the end of the day, why wouldn't extraterrestrials, with all the technology they have, supposedly, be changing into something that's more comforting to the person they're trying to approach, rather than just coming in their own form and scaring the living bejesus out of the person and having them run out of bed or run out of wherever they are?
And you said
I mean,
that,
to me, it makes sense.
yeah, and you said you said it was an extraterrestrial. ITET. I just got that now, but yeah, that's
Well, that's not why Stephen King did, I don't think. I think it's just the point that
yeah.
they only called it for most of the book, because, which if you haven't read the book it is so much more detailed and so much better than the movies, any of the movies they've ever done of it. The book is, it's long, but it's Stephen King. But the book, I mean, it's amazing. It's just such an amazing, the detail he goes into in the book, and he goes.
Jeremy, talk about your podcast again. How often do you drop episodes? I've listened to it, but it's your. How often do you drop episodes? And you have over 200. So talk about that, if you would, please.
I mean, Paranormal Normal. It's been going on. My 2-year anniversary is coming up pretty soon. I drop regular episodes every Saturday, and on Wednesday every week there's always a bonus episode, whether it's episodes of Global Strangeness, my other podcast, that's a paranormal discussion podcast more than the interview format I do, or I drop brackets I've done with people, whether our big group brackets or one-on-one brackets with people. Special episodes, bonus episodes always drop on Wednesdays. So Wednesdays and Saturdays, Paranormal Normal. Maniacal Music Musings, my second podcast I started with my good co-host Chansey, one of my best friends. We drop regular episodes every Friday, and we drop, if there's bonus episodes to be dropped, they drop on Tuesdays.
Wow,
just to
you're
keep
busy.
the fun going. Oh, tell me about it. And of course, the podcast I mentioned earlier, Bracket Bastards, that drops every Sunday. We record live every Sunday now. So Sunday at 3 Eastern, 2 Central, you could find us live on either Bracket Bastards YouTube channel, or if you follow any of my channels on Facebook or whatever, you can find us there as well. Okay. And I recently just joined another show, The Asylum with Harley. I recently got invited to be a co-host on that show. So we're usually live every Sunday at 8 o'clock Eastern, and just search The Asylum with Harley. We're live on there. We are skipping this week though because Super Bowl, but we pre-recorded for that. So
yeah, absolutely.
That's all the shows you can find me on.
Yeah, Paranormal, the new normal. I get it on Apple. You can just follow the show. I follow the show right now. So I want to thank you, Jeremy, for coming on my podcast. I hope you would come back on maybe towards Halloween. We can talk about more in depth about the Salem witch trials and things of more hauntings later this year, maybe right before October. You are a busy person, but I want to thank you for coming on my podcast. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, and thanks again.
Rob, and anytime you want me back on, I'm always glad to come back on and talk paranormal.